In the glittering world of early 2000s socialites, one heiress stood out, born into an empire even more opulent than those of her famous contemporaries. Casey Johnson, heiress to the Johnson & Johnson fortune, was a name synonymous with both privilege and tragedy. Her journey from the pinnacle of New York's social scene to the depths of personal turmoil in Beverly Hills tells a story of wealth, loss, and the search for meaning beyond the glittering facade. Casey Johnson entered the world on September 24, 1979, as a scion of the Johnson family. Her father, Robert Woody Johnson IV, and her mother, Sale Johnson, were prominent figures in New York society. The Johnson family name carried immense weight, rooted in the creation of Johnson & Johnson in 1886 by three brothers: Robert Wood Johnson, Casey's great-great-grandfather, Edward Mead Johnson, and James Wood Johnson. From humble beginnings selling medicated plasters and sterile surgical products, the company had grown into a global healthcare behemoth, worth over $432 billion by Casey's time. Growing up in Manhattan, Casey had access to the best of everything: luxurious travels, private chefs, and summers at her father's Hampton estate. Her childhood was marked by opulent parties filled with the city's elite. Unlike most children playing dress-up, Casey wore real snakeskin pumps and toted Chanel bags. But behind the glitz and glamour, she faced significant challenges. At the tender age of 8, Casey was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, a condition that forced her to mature quickly as she managed her health. At 13, she co-authored a book with her parents titled Managing Your Child's Diabetes, and her father established the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation in her honor. Despite her privileged upbringing, Casey's family life was far from perfect. Her mother, Sale, described her as a difficult child and noted that Woody, not known for being warm and affectionate, often overindulged Casey with material gifts, such as a car before she had a driver's license. What Casey truly craved, however, was her father's approval, a desire that would remain unfulfilled, leaving her emotionally shattered. Casey and her peers, including her lifelong friends Paris and Nikki Hilton, became the faces of a new generation of socialites who blurred the lines between fame and infamy. The tabloids couldn't get enough of them, and the public was fascinated by their lives of excess. Casey herself often appeared in the gossip columns, portrayed as a dumb blonde who couldn't live without her poodle, Zoe, and was constantly followed by paparazzi. This relentless media scrutiny was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it made her a household name. On the other, it painted a simplistic and often unflattering picture of her life. For example, headlines mocked her for dropping out of Brown University because she couldn't keep her dog in the dorms, and the New York Post famously reported on her father's payment of $20,000 in damages after her Chihuahua, 𝐸𝐞𝐦𝐞𝐦, soiled a hotel suite. Such incidents were trivial yet deeply invasive, contributing to Casey's growing frustration with her public persona. As her frustration mounted, Casey sought a fresh start. In 2001, amid her parents' divorce and the folding of the magazine she worked for as a beauty editor, she relocated to Los Angeles. There, she hoped to escape her identity as the Johnson & Johnson girl and forge her own path. Los Angeles, with its focus on celebrity over old-money aristocracy, offered her a chance to blend in, to be seen for something other than her family name. However, her move to Los Angeles did not bring the freedom she sought. The glitter of Hollywood masked a darker underbelly, and Casey found herself drawn into a whirlwind of parties and substance abuse. She formed a tumultuous relationship with an unexpected MTV star, further fueling her descent. This relationship, while providing a sense of belonging, also led her down a path of no return. Estranged from her family and cut off from her inheritance, Casey's life spiraled out of control. Despite her attempts to carve out her own identity, Casey struggled with the pressures and expectations placed upon her. The constant media attention, combined with her own personal demons, proved overwhelming. She felt misunderstood and exploited, yearning for genuine connections in a world where everyone seemed to want something from her. Casey Johnson had always struggled with her identity, trying to carve out her own legacy beyond the famous Johnson & Johnson name. Her status as an heiress brought both privilege and unwanted labels. At a glamorous MTV movie afterparty, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 experienced a moment that left her feeling deeply disheartened. As she walked past two girls, one of them whispered to the other, "Oh, that's the 𝐤𝐮𝐤𝐻𝐿 girl." Her heart sank, and she felt reduced to nothing more than her family's fortune, yearning to be recognized for who she was rather than as a mere extension of her family's legacy. By the age of 23, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 was fully immersed in the Hollywood lifestyle. She lived in Beverly Hills and dreamed of becoming an actress. She starred alongside 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐞 and Paris Hilton in a documentary called 𝐥𝐢𝐤𝐞, released in 2002, which explored the lives of wealthy young heiresses. 𝐿𝐼𝐤, along with her friends, had a certain sparkle that set them apart. They were the it girls of their time, turning heads wherever they went. 𝐿𝐼𝐤 found herself in the midst of a close-knit circle of famous friends, including 𝐥𝐢𝐤 and Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie, and 𝐵iJoux Phillips. They were often seen partying together in Los Angeles, earning the media nickname Heiress Gone Wild. This lifestyle brought 𝐿𝐼𝐤 not only attention but also drama. Feuds and gossip became a regular part of her life, with tabloids eagerly covering every juicy detail. One notable incident occurred in 2002 at the nightclub Bungalow 8. 𝐿𝐼𝐤's ex-boyfriend, Stephen 𝐸𝐻𝐿, was present, and in a moment of bitterness, she made a snide comment about his choice of partners. This led to a brawl involving Nicole Richie, who accidentally cut Stephen with a piece of broken glass. The incident, widely publicized, further fueled 𝐿𝐼𝐤's reputation as a party girl surrounded by chaos. Around this time, 𝐿𝐼𝐤's longtime friend Paris Hilton approached her with an offer that could have changed the course of her life. Paris was about to star in a new reality show called The Simple Life and wanted 𝐿𝐼𝐤 to be her co-star. However, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 declined, hoping to be taken seriously as an actress and fearing that reality TV might tarnish her prospects. The decision would become one of her biggest regrets, as The Simple Life catapulted Paris and Nicole Richie into superstardom. In 2004, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 faced another dramatic event. Her home was burglarized, and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of jewelry were stolen. At an MTV party, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 accused Playboy playmate Nicole 𝐿𝐮 of being involved in the theft, which led to a physical altercation where 𝐵iJoux Phillips allegedly slapped and punched Nicole. 𝐿𝐮 later filed a defamation suit against 𝐿𝐼𝐤 and 𝐵iJoux, but the matter was quietly settled. 𝐿𝐼𝐤's partying and public feuds were a source of concern for her parents, Sale and Woody Johnson. They hated seeing the Johnson name dragged through the mud and worried about 𝐿𝐼𝐤's well-being. They staged an intervention, flying to California in hopes of convincing her to go to rehab. However, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 rejected their help, insisting she was fine. This strained her relationship with her father, Woody, who eventually decided to wash his hands of her, cutting her off financially after a scandal involving her aunt, Libet Johnson. The scandal unfolded in 2006 when 𝐿𝐼𝐤 suspected that her aunt was having an affair with her then-boyfriend, John D. Although the emails obtained by Page 6 didn't provide concrete evidence of an affair, the intimate tone was enough to upset 𝐿𝐼𝐤. In a moment of vulnerability, she spoke to the press, venting her frustration and humiliation. The scandal was a sensation, and the Johnson family, known for their private nature, was horrified by the public exposure. This incident was the final straw for Woody Johnson, who cut 𝐿𝐼𝐤 off from her trust fund, effectively severing her financial ties to the family. The fallout was devastating for 𝐿𝐼𝐤. She felt betrayed by both her aunt and her ex-boyfriend, and the public humiliation was a bitter pill to swallow. Despite the challenges, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 tried to find her own path. She continued to have a relationship with her mother, Sale Johnson, and became involved in charitable work. She actively supported her father's juvenile diabetes research foundation and expressed a desire to focus more on children's charities, including the Sherp Orphanage in Kenya and the Malawi Project. 𝐿𝐼𝐤 was on a journey to discover her purpose and make a positive impact, striving to create a legacy of her own beyond the shadows of her family's name. This journey also led her to contemplate motherhood. Her desire to adopt a child was sparked during a trip to Cambodia, where she fell in love with a little girl named Lavisa. However, due to adoption restrictions from Cambodia, 𝐿𝐼𝐤 had to look elsewhere. In March 2007, she began the adoption process and received a referral for a child. The day she received the photos of her soon-to-be daughter was one of the happiest of her life. She described being overwhelmed with joy, crying hysterically. Determined not to repeat her own upbringing, �‌𝐸𝐶 vowed not to spoil her daughter with material possessions. She wanted to teach her daughter, whom she named Ava Monroe after her idol Marilyn Monroe, the value of things, planning to give her a more grounded upbringing. However, her aspirations for motherhood were overshadowed by personal and familial turmoil. The adoption did not receive unanimous support from her family, particularly from her father, Woody Johnson, who felt 𝐸𝐸𝐶 was not ready for such a responsibility. In 2008, 𝐸𝐸𝐶 made a bold attempt to reconcile with her estranged father. She flew to New York with the hope that Woody would meet his granddaughter. When she arrived at her father's Hampton estate, she was met by Woody's new fiancée, Suzanne 𝐸𝐤𝐞, who coldly informed her that she was not welcome. Despite 𝐸𝐸𝐶's determination to wait for her father, the situation escalated to the point where the police were called, and Woody ultimately asked her to leave and never return. This rejection devastated 𝐸𝐸𝐶, leaving her heartbroken and further deepening the rift between her and her father. Amidst her emotional struggles, 𝐸𝐸𝐶 found solace in a relationship with Courtney Semmel, daughter of the former CEO of Yahoo. The two shared similar backgrounds and struggles, both dealing with familial estrangement and the pressures of living up to their family names. Their relationship, however, was tumultuous, marked by passionate highs and destructive lows. At one point, a heated argument led to Courtney allegedly setting 𝐸𝐸𝐶's hair on fire. Despite these issues, they continued their on-again, off-again relationship, even considering a reality show about heiresses in love as a means of gaining financial independence and escaping their family's shadows. 𝐸𝐸𝐶's life began to spiral further out of control. By the summer of 2009, she was fully immersed in the Hollywood party scene, a lifestyle that exacerbated her struggles with diabetes and substance abuse. Concerned for 𝐸𝐸𝐶's well-being and her granddaughter's safety, her mother, Sale Johnson, took custody of Ava. Despite her efforts to help 𝐸𝐸𝐶, including attempts to get her into rehab, Sale faced significant challenges. 𝐸𝐸𝐶 resisted help, even calling the police on her mother during one intervention, accusing her of trying to take Ava away. As 𝐸𝐸𝐶's condition worsened, Sale resorted to tough love, cutting off financial support until 𝐸𝐸𝐶 agreed to enter a rehab program. Unfortunately, this approach did not yield the desired results. 𝐸𝐸𝐶's father, Woody, remained distant and uninvolved, further isolating 𝐸𝐸𝐶 in her time of need. Despite her deteriorating circumstances, including financial difficulties that left her unable to pay rent and facing the repossession of her car, 𝐸𝐸𝐶 continued to struggle with accepting help. Living conditions at her Los Angeles home became dire, with reports of squalor, including a rat infestation and a neglected swimming pool. Friends and family were increasingly worried, but 𝐸𝐸𝐶 seemed unable to find her footing. Her struggles culminated in a heartbreaking interview where she lamented her failures and expressed jealousy over her friend Paris Hilton's success. In November 2009, 𝐸𝐸𝐶 Johnson's life took a tragic turn that underscored the deepening crisis she faced. Her mental health, already fragile, began to deteriorate further. The signs were evident, but perhaps no one realized the full extent of her despair until one fateful day when she sent a distressing text message to Courtney Semmel, her on-and-off girlfriend. The message was a chilling cry for help. "I've taken a lot of pills and I'm going to sleep forever." Alarmed, Courtney immediately contacted emergency services. 𝐸𝐸𝐶 was rushed to the hospital and admitted to the intensive care unit, where she remained for 3 days. It was a moment that highlighted the precarious balance of her life, teetering on the edge of a full-blown crisis. Her brief hospitalization provided a temporary reprieve, but the underlying issues that had led her to such a desperate act were far from resolved. After her release from the ICU, 𝐸𝐸𝐶's behavior became increasingly erratic. In a startling incident, she broke into the home of Jasmine Leonard, a friend who had previously helped care for 𝐸𝐸𝐶's adopted daughter, Ava. Jasmine was out of town, and 𝐸𝐸𝐶 took the opportunity to steal clothes, jewelry, and even underwear. The incident was bizarre and baffling, especially considering 𝐸𝐸𝐶's wealthy background. It suggested a deeper turmoil, possibly driven by a need for attention or a cry for help. The stolen items were discovered when 𝐸𝐤𝐤𝐞𝐦𝐞, noticing 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤𝐞 wearing some of Jasmine's clothes, contacted Jasmine and subsequently the police. The authorities arrived at 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's home and found the stolen items, leading to her arrest for grand theft. The situation was surreal. An heiress to a vast fortune, 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 had no apparent need to steal. Her actions seemed more like a manifestation of her inner chaos than a deliberate criminal act. 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's arrest was another public embarrassment in a life increasingly characterized by scandal and controversy. Her friends and family hoped that this brush with the law might serve as a wake-up call and lead to her getting the help she desperately needed. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The arrest did little to curb her downward spiral. Instead, 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 felt more isolated and betrayed, particularly angry at 𝐸𝐤𝐤𝐞𝐸 for turning her in. It was another blow to an already strained relationship. With few people left to turn to, 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 found herself on the doorstep of Tila tequila, a controversial reality TV star. Tila's motives were questionable, and many believed that her relationship with 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 was more about gaining publicity than genuine affection. Almost immediately, Tila began showcasing their relationship to the public, announcing an engagement in an online video. The engagement ring Tila flaunted was allegedly the same one 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 had given to 𝐸𝐤𝐤𝐞𝐸 when they secretly got engaged. The whirlwind engagement raised eyebrows and seemed more like a spectacle than a sincere commitment. The engagement announcement was followed by a series of bizarre public appearances and statements by Tila, who appeared more interested in the spotlight than in supporting 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 through her troubles. Many observers felt that Tila was exploiting 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's vulnerability for her own gain. The public display of their relationship, complete with over-the-top declarations of love and wealth, seemed hollow and performative. On December 29, 2009, 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 and Tila had a significant argument, after which 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 left Tila's house, leaving her dogs behind. She spent New Year's Eve alone in a guest house of a family friend, a stark contrast to her usual celebrations with friends and family. It was a lonely and quiet end to a tumultuous year. 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's isolation became more apparent as she retreated further into herself, distanced from those who once cared for her. Sadly, on January 4, 2010, 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤𝐞 was found dead in the guest house. She had passed away alone at just 30 years old. The news of her death was a tragic and sobering end to her life, which had been marked by privilege, scandal, and struggle. The autopsy revealed that she had died of natural causes due to diabetic ketoacidosis, a condition related to her diabetes. It was a stark reminder of the seriousness of her illness, which she had struggled to manage amidst her chaotic lifestyle. In the aftermath of her death, the media frenzy continued, with Tila tequila making various public appearances and statements that many found distasteful. 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's family and friends mourned her loss, reflecting on the challenges she faced and the potential she had. Personal struggles. Immediately after 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's death, Tila took to social media and her self-run gossip blog to share intimate details about 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's life and their short-lived relationship. She made bold claims, including her intention to seek custody of 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's adopted daughter, 𝐬𝐻𝐤𝐤𝐫. This statement was met with skepticism, as Tila had never spent time with 𝐬𝐻𝐤𝐫 and had only been acquainted with 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 for a few weeks. Nonetheless, Tila publicly expressed her desire to adopt the child, a move that many saw as a publicity stunt. Tila also speculated about the cause of 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's death, suggesting that it might have been due to an overdose of prescription drugs. She made these claims prior to the release of the official autopsy and toxicology reports, which later confirmed that 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤 had died of natural causes related to diabetic ketoacidosis. Tila's premature and unfounded speculation added to the media frenzy surrounding 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's death. Amidst the media storm, a significant incident occurred when Nicole Hilton and Bijou Phillips, close friends of 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤, went to Tila's house to retrieve 𝐤𝐻𝐤𝐤's dogs. These dogs were dear to 𝐤𝐻𝐻𝐤𝐤, and her friends wanted to ensure their safety and well-being. However, the situation quickly escalated when Tila accused Nicole Hilton of planning to euthanize the dogs so they could be buried with 𝐤𝐻𝐻𝐤𝐤. This bizarre and unfounded accusation shocked many and added to the already chaotic situation. The confrontation outside Tila's house was tense, with paparazzi capturing the moment. Tila's accusations were baseless, and Nicole, visibly distressed, denied any such intentions. Ultimately, the dogs were taken to a veterinarian for a checkup and were found to be in good health. They were then released into the care of the Johnson family, putting to rest any concerns about their welfare. Despite the resolution of the dog custody issue, the tensions between Tila and Casey's friends and family continued to simmer. Just days after Casey's death, Tila published a blog post targeting Jasmine Leonard, a former friend of Casey's who had previously accused Casey of theft. The post blamed Jasmine for contributing to Casey's troubles and portrayed her in a negative light. This public attack further strained relations and underscored the chaos that had engulfed Casey's life in her final months. Jasmine, meanwhile, had her own perspective on the situation. She had previously called the police on Casey after discovering that items, including clothing and underwear, had been stolen from her home. Jasmine claimed that the Johnson family supported her decision to prosecute Casey for the theft, and she expressed hope that Casey would face consequences for her actions. Despite this, she maintained that the family's internal matters were private and that her interactions with them had been respectful. He spoke out about Casey Johnson, describing her as a fragile, beautiful, witty, and wonderful girl who was desperately searching for love. Jasmine admitted that she loved Casey and tried to help her, but ultimately couldn't save her. She expressed frustration with Tila Tequila for exploiting Casey's death for attention, accusing Tila of enabling Casey's demise and preventing her from getting the help she needed. Jasmine issued a cease and desist letter to Tila over a blog post, expressing that Casey, in her right mind, would never have associated with Tila. Tequila claimed to have last spoken with Casey on December 30th, after an argument about Casey's dogs. The last text she received from Casey was a simple "I love you." Tila said she left town for family business on December 31st, returning immediately after hearing of Casey's death. The Johnson family did not allow Tila to attend Casey's funeral, with Woody Johnson stating that Casey had been trying to find her identity and had to take responsibility for herself. Casey Johnson was a deeply unhappy person despite her wealth and status. She struggled with loneliness and had difficulty forming lasting relationships. She admired Marilyn Monroe and saw similarities between them, noting the sadness and complexity of Monroe's life. Casey felt misunderstood and pigeonholed as a stereotypical dumb blonde heiress, a perception she resented. Her daughter, Ava Monroe Johnson, was adopted by Sale Johnson and her then-husband Ahmad Rashad after Casey's death. Despite their subsequent divorce, they continued to co-parent Ava. Casey Johnson's life and untimely death highlighted the challenges of wealth and fame. She was perceived by some as a tragic figure who, like her idol Marilyn Monroe, struggled with inner demons and a sense of isolation. Her passing at the age of 30 underscored the fact that wealth and status do not necessarily bring happiness or fulfillment. Her story serves as a sobering reminder of the challenges faced by those who live under the glare of public scrutiny and the weight of expectations. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and until next time, take care.